Welcome back to the Article 6 educational video series. This is Module 3, Part 1. And in this video, we explore what governments need to put in place to authorize international cooperation under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This module builds on the previous video from Module 2, where we have looked at key steps in developing Article 6 projects. By the end of this video, you'll be able to define what authorization means in the context of Article 6. Describes the steps countries must take to authorize ITMOs, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. Identify key considerations for setting up authorization frameworks. And understand how authorization links with transparency and reporting. Let's get started. What is authorization? Authorization is a critical step in international cooperation under Article 6.2 guidance. It is a formal action by the government that allows mitigation outcomes from a cooperative approach to be used in the context of the Paris Agreement. The country providing authorization must clearly specify the authorized purpose, which may include use towards achieving country's nationally determined contribution, or NDC. Use for international mitigation purposes other than NDCs, for example, to comply with CORSIA, the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation under ICAO, or use other purposes as determined by authorizing entity, such as voluntary offsetting by companies or subnational governments. When a country provides authorization, it also commits to properly account for the ITMOs and to report key information to the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This helps ensure transparency, accuracy, and avoidance of double counting. Let's look at the real-world case of how countries are already operationalizing Article 6.2 and formalize authorization through a clearly defined mitigation project. One of the first examples of how authorization is given under the Article 6.2 comes from Ghana's cooperation with Switzerland, focusing on the climate-smart agriculture project. In November 2022, Ghana's Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation formally authorized the international transfer and use of mitigation outcomes from a project promoting sustainable rice cultivation through improved agricultural practices. This authorization clearly identifies the authorized purpose, including use towards an NDC, international mitigation purposes, and other purposes such as voluntary offsetting, and specify the authorized mitigation activity and cleansing period from 2022 to 2030, and named UNDP Ghana as the authorized entity, and define how mitigation outcomes will be accounted to avoid double counting through the corresponding adjustment required under Article 6.2. In total, Ghana authorized around 1 million tons of CO2 equivalent in mitigation outcomes to be tracked through a registry system and reported via the UNFCCC's Centralized Accounting and Reporting Platform, CARP. This case illustrates how authorization is not just a political agreement. It's a structured, transparent information by a country to define, approve, and account for ITMOs under the Paris Agreement. Another example is Guyana's authorization for emission reductions from sustainable forest management. In 2024, the government of Guyana issued an official letter of authorization under Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. The letter allows emission reductions and removals from forest-related activities under the REDD+ program, such as those that reduce deforestation or enhance forest carbon stocks, which are verified by the Architecture for REDD+ Transactions standard called ART trees, to be internationally recognized and transferred. These mitigation outcomes are authorized for use towards NDC purposes, for international mitigation purposes, including by airplane operators to meet offsetting requirements under the CORSIA scheme, and for other purposes, such as voluntary carbon markets. The letter of authorization also specifies the covered period and the maximum amount of authorized emission reductions and removals. By issuing this authorization, Guyana committed to not counting the authorized reductions and removals to demonstrate progress and achievement of its own NDC to avoid double counting, and to report transparently to the UNFCCC. This authorization allows Guyana to be the first country that provides credits eligible for use by airlines in the first phase of CORSIA into the market. This example also showcases how a country can formally approve international use of mitigation outcomes and fulfill the basic authorization requirements under Article 6.2. How countries provide authorization? To enable this, countries must put several things in place. A. Set up authorization arrangements. Designate a competent authority to issue authorization. This could be, for example, the Minister of Environment or other specialized government agency or body. Define authorization process that may include how the authorization will be considered and how the final decision will be made. An important part of this process is that authorization involves three key components. 1. Authorization of the cooperative approach itself. 2. Authorization of specific ITOMOS. 3. Authorization of entities, such as project developers or private actors that will use ITOMOS. Some countries may establish a single consolidated process to cover all necessary contents of authorization. Others may prefer sequential process that address them separately. B. Set up authorization criteria. Each country should define clear criteria for issuing authorization. For example, at the mitigation activity level, this could include eligible project types, such as renewable energy and forestry, standard to certify emission reductions, for instance, the UNFCCC's Article 6.4 mechanism, bilateral creating frameworks, or independent programs. Alignment with the country's nationally determined contributions, contribution to the sustainable development, and mitigation and other benefit sharing to ensure that the host country also benefits from the emission reductions from the projects and other benefits such as adaptation. C. Provide and publish authorization. When issuing authorization, the government must include all 14 minimum elements required by the UNFCCC as outlined in Decision 6 CMA4. Consider using voluntary standardized authorization template provided by the UNFCCC Secretariat, available on the Centralized Accounting and Reporting Platform, CARP. Authorization may be granted at different stages of the project cycle. However, first transfer of ITOMOS may only occur after the authorization has been issued. After providing authorization, the government should also publish authorization statements promptly, submit them to the UNFCCC as part of official reports, and may upload them to CARP, which act as a public repository. D. Record authorized ITOMOS and accompanying information. Countries must also ensure that authorization decisions and subsequent actions related to the authorized ITOMOS are properly recorded using a registry system that complies with Article 6.2 guidance and related guidelines. This registry must enable countries to report information annually to the UNFCCC. E. Avoid double counting. To avoid double counting, each country must apply an appropriate corresponding adjustment method based on its NDC type. This is formally reported every 2 years as part of the biannual transparency report. Let's look at how Vanuatu and Switzerland applied Article 6.2 authorization process in their cooperation on a renewable energy project. A. Set up authorization arrangements. Switzerland designated its Federal Office for the Environment as the competent authority for Article 6.2 cooperation, while Vanuatu designated the Ministry of Climate Change Adaptation, Meteorology and Geohazards, Energy, Environment, and National Disaster Management through the Department of Climate Change as its competent authority. Both countries also set up the key steps in their ITMOS authorization process. B. Set up authorization criteria. The authorized activity, electrification of Vanuatu's inhabited islands through solar power, involves installation solar power systems in remote island communities. The project meets the criteria set up by both countries, including by using approved methodologies, contribution to sustainable development, and alignment with the country's nationally determined contributions. C. Provide and publish authorization. Each country's authorization clearly identifies the mitigation activity and its crediting period from 2022 to 2030. The authorized entity, UNDP. The total authorized volume of mitigation outcomes, 97,000 tons CO2 equivalent. The authorized use, which includes use towards an NDC, other international mitigation purposes, and other purposes such as voluntary offsetting. The statement was prepared in line with UNFCCC Article 6.2 guidance and publicly referenced. Switzerland authorization was also uploaded on CARP, promoting transparent access to this information. D. Record authorized ITMOS. Both countries identify the registry systems they will use to record authorization and transfers, ensuring transparency and accurate accounting. E. Avoid double counting. Each country committed to applying the appropriate method for corresponding adjustments in line with its nationally determined contribution target. This ensures that transferred ITMOS are not double counted between Switzerland and Vanuatu. This example shows how clear procedures and official documentation between parties can enable credible and transparent cooperation under Article 6.2. Changes to authorization. Sometimes a country may need to change a previously issued authorization due to certain circumstances or unmet conditions. Any changes must follow Article 6.2 guidance and be reflected in national reporting. However, a key rule is this: once a mitigation outcome has been first transferred, the original authorization typically cannot be changed, unless this was clearly allowed in the initially communicated terms and conditions. To maintain integrity and transparency, countries should clearly define when and how changes can happen, and establish transparent procedures for communication and documentation to support cooperation, and among other things, effectively avoid double counting. This ensures authorizations stay adaptable while protecting against double counting. Ensuring consistency through reporting and review. Transparency is critical to building trust and ensuring integrity in cooperative approaches. Countries must report on their engagement under Article 6.2 to show that they are following the guidance. There are three main types of reports. Number one, the initial report, submitted at the early stage, typically before the authorization of ITOMOS, describing how countries intend to cooperate and the necessary arrangements. Number two, the annual information, reported on ITOMOS information, tracked through the registry system and submitted to the UNFCCC by 15 April of each year. Number three, the regular information, as part of the biannual transparency report, shows how the cooperative approaches are implemented, how ITOMOS are used towards NDCs, and how double counting is avoided by submitting to the UNFCCC at the end of every 2 years. To support this, the UNFCCC provides templates and reporting tools via CARP, and a reference manual to guide countries. Depending on the type of report, once submitted, it will undergo a consistency check and formal review process to ensure alignment with Article 6 guidance. This helps promote trust and credibility in the system. To support transparency and integrity under Article 6.2, Thailand and Switzerland report extensively on their cooperation in the first Article 6 project, the Bangkok e-bus program. Initial report, both countries submitted initial reports outlining how they intend to cooperate, including the framework and authorization arrangements for the project. Annual information, mitigation outcomes generated from replacing diesel and natural gas buses with electric buses are issued and tracked through Thailand's national registry, operated by the Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization, TGO, and subsequently transferred and recognized by Switzerland's emission trading registry. This information forms the basis for annual information submission to the UNFCCC. Regular information. Thailand demonstrates the application of corresponding adjustments to avoid double counting when it tracks the NDC progress in the biannual transparency report. Switzerland also committed to reporting ITOMOS use through biannual reports in line with UNFCCC guidance. CARP and review process. Authorization documents are published both nationally and on CARP. The countries also participate in the review process conducted under the UNFCCC. This case demonstrates how cooperative partners can ensure consistency with Article 6.2 guidance by aligning their registry systems, applying approved accounting methods, and openly publishing required documentation. Key considerations when setting up an authorization framework. A clear and robust authorization framework helps countries encourage high-quality mitigation projects, provide clarity to investors and developers, and maintain credibility in international cooperation. When setting up an authorization framework, some key good practices that countries may wish to consider include: A. When designating the authority, clearly identify and publish the contact information of the competent authority. Establish coordination with line ministries and agencies to ensure that authorization decisions align with NDC priorities. B. Process and criteria. Define how project developers can request authorization. Communicate timelines and approval steps. And consider publishing a list of priority sectors or technologies to guide investment. C. Promoting transparency. Make authorization procedures and criteria public. Publish authorization statements in a timely manner. And ensure national systems can integrate authorization decisions with registry and reporting systems to the UNFCCC. To recap, in this video, we learned what authorization means under Article 6 and why it matters. how countries can establish systems to provide and record authorizations. What criteria and information are required, and how transparency and consistency are maintained through reporting and review. In the next and final video of the series, we will dive into how ITOMOS are tracked, reported, and used to meet NDCs or other international mitigation purposes, and how this information links to the broader transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.